Welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I am your host, Mookie Blogs. This podcast is focused on the art of consultative selling, brand differentiation, standing out from the crowd, making your mark, and converting for personal and business success. Today we focus on the personal brand that we own, that we all have, our careers, how we differentiate, and most significantly, how we evolve and change with the ever-changing marketplace. Ever since COVID and beyond, the shift to virtual work has freed us up. We're no longer tied to physical locations, and the idea of being a digital nomad has appealed to many of us. In parallel with that added flexibility, many of us are reconsidering and redefining who we are, how we do business, how we interact with clients and colleagues, and ultimately who we want to be and what we want to do when we grow up. What's our next phase like? How can our careers grow? And how can we take advantage of not only the technology in these crazy, chaotic times, but this idea that quality of life might even be more important than the bottom line? My guest today is Torrey Moss. We are colleagues, former colleagues, going back quite some time and several agencies ago. And we've had this almost magical convergence over the last couple of years where we've been considering all of these things I've just mentioned. How can we change? How can we evolve ourselves and our careers? How can we feed our families and at the same time get the most fulfillment that we can from our professional lives? Welcome aboard, Torrey.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, man. This is amazing.
So can you tell us a little bit about specifically the last year and a half of your life? Because where we picked off, you were in Thailand with your whole family doing what you do. And I thought that that was fascinating. I've heard of a lot of people who have hit the road, working from the road, often taking their families with them. You embodied that new kind of digital nomadic model. And I was intrigued, and I think our listeners would be curious to know more as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm kind of a digital nomad interrupted myself. So I kind of started my career, in Costa Rica in digital tech. Um, so my Thailand trip was really funny. So I wasn't actually doing kind of traditional digital nomad work out there, but that story probably goes back to maybe last January. And I think it's just as much a personal evolution as it is kind of like the personal branding, business kind of evolution. But yeah, I ended up kind of losing my job back in January and just had this stark realization that, I had no idea what I really wanted to do. I was kind of at this funny point where I'd been working in digital tech, in and around New York for, around 15 years and, enjoyed it for what it was. But then I had that major, kind of influx of disruption in terms of like losing that job and losing a huge part of my own ego, and self identity, which really kind of kicked off a long and interesting process that, I wouldn't say culminated in Thailand, which is what I thought it would do. But anyway, so yeah, lost my job in January. Next day, sitting there Googling what makes me happy, which is also equally depressing to not have any idea what you want to do. And in tech, I've been so much, copying and integrating. It was just kind of imprinted on me. Um, so yes, I lost my job. I started to look at, you know, a bunch of different resources, just kind of grasping at straws, and found a couple good books that really helped me along the way. So I ended up reading a really good book that helps kind of the left brain structured. Jenny Blake wrote a book called Pivot, which was really nice for me to have some structure in this, seemingly abundant, expansive, everything's possible world. But it can also be very terrifying to not really know and what to do. So that was super helpful for me. I also had been diving into Rick Rubin's Creative Act, which was also awesome. It just gave me a chance to really take a step back and take time and really not rush into something. And a kind of combination of those and giving myself permission to start experimenting, really figuring out what I wanted to do and not really being on anyone else's timeline. So I started to write stuff down, do a bunch of different experiments, and then I had a bunch of energy to actually open up my own pest control company, which sounds very funny, and kind of a 180 from digital tech. And so I just said, what the hell, I'm going to go for it. So flash forward, I was kind of up in Albany, New York, going for my like pest control license, and ended up, shortly thereafter opening up kind of like a seasonal, eco-friendly pest control company called Ticky Boom up near my place, and doing, I was able to do all the branding and kind of tech side and setup of it, which was fun. But yeah, that was amazing. It was a super fun, crazy transition, and probably I'd say one of the most expansive, times in my life, where I finally did really feel like there was a lot of abundance to life. There was things that, that can happen. And if you kind of push and you really, instead of being something that you read about, something that you're kind of feeling, and seeing that. So that was an amazing experience.
So
Dove in.
let's hold there for a second, just
Sure.
as a little. Let's put a pin on it. So you were working in digital tech, and I worked with you years and years ago for, you're saying, 15 years. So your sense of identity, who you were, was wrapped up in your career. It was the sole source of income, helped support your family. You were the digital tech guy, and you were good at it, and you were rolling along and singing a song, and then change happened. And when that change happened, you were, in a sense, forced to reevaluate your core identity. You were comfortable, but you were doing that one thing. And when that happened, you looked toward various sources. We'll put the links in the description of the podcast. And these inspired you. The Rick Rubin series is captivating. I've seen a lot of that and been inspired by that as well. And I'll check out the other reference. But so you had some moments of contemplation. You were able to kick back, look at your life, maybe make some new plans, and you transformed in this kind of ironic naked lunch kind of way. You sounds like it was an organic or environmentally friendly pest control small business opportunity that you created from scratch. You branded it, and you all of a sudden went from digital agency guy to entrepreneur. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay, all right. Because again, I think many folks listening have faced this kind of issue or are contemplating this kind of transformation from an established, comfortable career to something wholly new and redefining.
Yeah. And that, I think that was probably, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, right? Like what started out to be more of, kind of a career thing. I don't think I realized the power and how large that kind of like ego defining part of me really was. And that was kind of the eye opening thing, which is you kind of lose that. And that was a big part. And even still now, like I'm finding, I'm still having like parts of my identity that are also coming unraveling. We can get into that in a whole nother set. But this was the main one. This was latching on to New York tech, things that, you know, I think that I respected, things that I think are smart, and a lot of my ego is kind of tied up in there. Um, and then so you're kind of left sitting there going, okay, well, if you're not attached to this, you know, smart driven thing, then what are you? Which is can be scary as hell for sure.
Scary as hell, but also liberating. I go on LinkedIn right now, and I basically started my own career in digital strategy, marketing with a life science healthcare focus, going all the way back to 2003, 2004. And I look at LinkedIn and I see some of the same faces in some of the same places. doing a lot of the same kind of stuff. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, good for them. They've managed to just crank on their career and evolve and change and grow. And on the other hand, I'm kind of like, imagine doing the same thing for 20 years. And what else does life have to offer? So sometimes when you're in a corner or you paint yourself in the corner, they say, constraints are the trigger for creativity. That necessity is the mother of invention. So whether you're forced to make a change or whether you just feel you need to make a change, life opens up possibilities, but making that leap could be terrifying.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something funny too that I kind of went the other way, and I don't know what it was about this transition that made me be able to do it and not be a complete nightmare to my family. I wish I had a good resource to share there, but I don't know if it was just the right time. Um, but there was also a time during this where I realized that, that kind of propped up ego, and completely undeserving, by the way. Like, um, I wasn't even like, the small feudal lord of a small startup. I was even less on the totem pole. But this initiative didn't get launched, and I think my wife was glad that it didn't. But I was like, you know what? I'm so over the ego side that I actually was. I had written down a plan for the ego destruction tour, which was basically go do the most lowest things you can think of and just like completely obliterate your ego. The ego destruction tour never got launched. I think much to my wife's happiness, but that time was a big key piece of it. Like I said, which was starting on the career side, but being left with that, and like you said, super liberating, right? And I felt like I woke up, from a weird dream during that time. And I'd even saw kind of like a non-traditional, like cranial sacral healer at one point. Um, and I remembered her telling me, she's like, "Oh, you're creatively blocked." And I remembered having this thought process of going, "What does she know? I'm sitting here spinning out these amazing technology ideas all the time." In reality, at the time, was completely blocked creatively, and I think it was that openness, you know, like you said, that kind of expansiveness, that liberation that happens, and then you realize, like, oh, okay, but only in retrospect, I think, can you have some of those insights.
So how did you deal with the financial crunch? I think the number one reason that people stay on the same path is frankly security, and specifically financial security. You work for an agency, you work for the man. Even if you're an entrepreneur in your own kind of way, it's about stability. It's about income. It's taking care of the people you love, but also feeling that you're not lost at sea. It's terrifying to live paycheck to paycheck. Unfortunately, something like 65% of Americans do that. And it's even more terrifying when the spigot runs dry, when you find yourself perhaps dipping into savings and having a general sense of uncertainty, borderline terror as to how you're going to sustain yourself and your family. How did you cope with that kind of disruption during this transitional period?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd agree with you too. I do think it's one of the big things I think that holds people back. But I also think psychologically we have a really screwed up relationship, just in general, with money and finances, right? So even if you are dipping into savings or you are paycheck to paycheck, right? It's what's that relationship? And for me, I have a lot of historical kind of family baggage around that, which is really hard. Kind of coming from a more conservative family background where, like, you know, you just you didn't spend, you didn't take risks and things like that. um, I think it was really just, not wanting to waste the time. Because ultimately, I think the optics, if you looked at both my wife and I being like fairly high performing professionals, you would say, well, there's no way that you guys would fail in doing anything, right? But when you're in it, that financial pressure really ratchets up the terror level, right? When you're kind of staring down, the barrel of the gun, for example. I mean, highs and lows, like sometimes great. It didn't affect me, for the first time probably in my life. Other times, you know, terrifying and kind of, always having you know, always having the thought in the back of my head, like, okay, well, just run back and get a regular job. It's kind of like a bad relationship though. If you're done, you're done. You're not gonna, you know, it's like even though you're like, okay, cool, I can do this to kind of make some income. It was just, kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's kind of became the antithesis of my being to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
and-
totally relate to that. And the bad relationship idea is a great analogy. You always fall back to that bad relationship. There's always going to be great aspects of even the most abusive, unsatisfying kind of relationship. You remember the smile, you remember, a cozy Sunday morning, but the overall net negative of the relationship precludes you in your right mind from even considering going back. But when you're lonely, and that Sunday morning hits you, then you're like, oh, there's almost a magnetic attraction backward and not forward. And that's very much true for what we're used to in terms of our respective careers. So you get the security, you get the paycheck, you get the camaraderie, but you also get everything that motivated you to leave that kind of lifestyle, that kind of career trajectory. So if you can hold yourself from going back, then you have to deal with the downside of not having the positive aspects of that which you left behind. What's helped me, and it might sound like a ginormous rationalization, but I think there's kernels of truth to this. The model that has been set up by the Silicon Valley titans, namely Bezos, who pretty much cut the swath when he wrote that letter to his shareholders going all the way back into the 90s, that don't expect return on your investment for another 10, 15 years. He wrote that and Wall Street just went nuts. I remember every quarter the headlines in the Wall Street Journal throughout those years was, this is the quarter when Amazon goes broke. And what Bezos intuited, and which proved him correct retrospectively in an amazing trend-setting kind of way, was that you need to invest in a company, especially a radically transformative one, over a long stretch of time and many, many billions of dollars before you reach that tipping point of profitability and transformation. And that model has been replicated not only by Amazon, but Elon Musk embodies that to the T, where he was promising Tesla's before he even had the factory built, where his rockets are exploding left and right, and he's telling people we're going to be on Mars next year. So there's an element of overpromising and under-delivering, but at the same time, there's this pioneer spirit that's based on agility and risk-taking, but at the same time understands the value of sacrifice and also acknowledges the opportunity costs of going back to that old lover. If you keep doing what you've done, you're going to get the same results you've always had. And if you take the risk and if you leap off that ledge, there are no guarantees of success. But the one thing that is 100% true and for sure is that you're moving forward and not backward. And that's helped me because we're kind of in the same boat of trying to reevaluate our careers and trying new things. And, maybe the savings will get eaten up a little bit. And maybe there's going to be debt. And maybe there's going to be a lot of personal and financial insecurity, instability, and tremendous risk. But no pain, no gain, baby. No risk, no reward. And let's just dive in swimming and see what happens.
yeah, definitely. I think there's a few things to just touch on, right? And I think one of the things to me that kind of came up in the most nerdiest sense was new metrics, right? And I think like the idea of this financial success, which you never really arrive there, and quite honestly wasn't. This is going to be very kind of like privileged way of saying this, but just it's just diminishing returns, right? And so when you're kind of like you're focused with, or you're kind of uh, working in this idea that, yeah, I can get this job, and it's going to come with a lot of these concessions that aren't aligned with where I'm going. And I started to actually write down, like, well, how many terrible interactions did I have on a given week? You know, and I was just like, okay, well, I extrapolate that out, something crazy like, okay, what it's like thousands of not fun, shitty interactions per year, per week, whatever it was. But like, when you think about that versus when you're in that expansive stage, it's just so magnetic, and sometimes you only need one. One powerful interaction is enough to really like sustain you onto the next thing. And I had another kind of pivotal thing that happened, just before that. So my father-in-law passed away, and he was probably the closest person, to kind of our families to pass away. And so you're just sitting there, you're going there, you're cleaning out all this stuff, that's like the bank accounts are moving around. It's just, okay, well, that's a number. There's a bunch of shit that meant something to him that you're just kind of like shuffling around. And so I think there's an element of just having new kind of metrics and new positive quality interactions. And he was kind of someone that did what he wanted, like marched to his own tune. And so when you're kind of looking at, the job or the stability, I think you do kind of reach a point where it's like, okay, it's not worth it. Like it's worth it, to try stuff out. And, like, does it really matter if you tried for another 2 months and you ran up, or you ate through a little bit of savings to try something that, how long have you been sitting on that idea that you didn't execute on? Years, decades. And you kind of reach a point where you're just like, okay, are you going to do it or not? I think the other thing that's kind of interesting in there is just, it's the element of control, that we think that we have control over these things. And like, you think you have control by getting another job. But we don't. The reality is, like, I was laughing about being on this podcast, and I'd forgotten about a really funny moment where we were working together, and you actually were like, hey, we're going to have to like let you go at the agency. And I still remember this really funny, like, my key card wasn't working or something that day. So I remembered having like the guest key card. It was like a blank face on there. And I just remember laughing, showing it to you. I was like, so I guess it's a good day as any to be kind of let go. But we don't really have any control over those things. We don't know what flippant idea the CEO or the company is going to take. And, it's just kind of perceived control, and we don't. And being in that expansive space and having those awesome, interactions that are much deeper than just, when you're doing your own thing, it's not just kind of a segmented or a compartmentalized work thing. Then you're having positive interactions all over, and those are bleeding into kind of stuff that you're passionate about on the day. So I think for me, it was kind of those things that helped kind of champion through a little bit, which was, man, I'm able to really be focused and be present, and not fast forward through these great times and great conversations and real interactions around being an actual human being, then kind of being back in that environment where I felt like a lot of my day was fast forwarding through it. It was just too many to-do lists, and always trying to optimize for the future. And I just was kind of left with this feeling that I wonder, it's just like, how fast can you go through this day? How fast can you optimize it? And you just kind of think, well, congratulations, like you've fast forwarded through, you know, weeks, if not years of time that you just kind of miss there, right? So I think there's kind of the opportunity cost baked in there as
Yeah, I
well.
think that's the key point. If you're doing one thing, you're not doing another thing. And we are glorious creatures in denial and rationalization. So we're all in the moment, and we're cranking through, and we're doing okay, but we're not doing any of the other things that might make us more than just okay. And with that comes, to your point earlier, a sense of identity. I am this guy. This is who I am. This is what I do. And whether it's conscious or unconscious, it often precludes us from exploring other aspects of ourselves, which could conceivably be as fulfilling, not only in terms of that creative release, but perhaps even financially. You never know how you're undercutting yourself with one opportunity when you could or should be exploring another. I have a coworker now, and her father, who is a senior person in a big time digital company, and she was mentioning that her dad, this senior executive, has been writing this novel for a couple years, and she read parts of it, and she thinks it's funny and it's endearing and it's timely, and she's been imploring her dad to try to let it out there, publish it, and at the very least finish it. And her father's response was always, "Well, I'm too busy for that." And with the implicit suggestion that he's this senior executive at this very successful digital company. And it's not a matter of even being too busy, but his identity is wrapped up in his current career, precluding this parallel extension of himself, which is incredibly fulfilling to him, but he just can't go there. And it's that feeling of self limiting yourself based on what you're doing now that sometimes hides opportunities that have just been dying to get out for decades, going all the way back, maybe as far as you can remember.
Yeah, I think one of the other really awesome things that happened is it was actually quite the opposite. And Mike, you probably had this same thing happening to you, right? Where, yeah, in your mind you have this identity, but your day-to-day interactions are completely different and largely, super positive and expansive and most of the time supporting. And but then one of the cool things that you find is that the same people that you imagine, in that world to maybe not accept that, or that breaks that mental model that you have, actually gives them permission to do stuff, and that was one of the coolest things for me, was just even doing the pest control company. People would see that and then they would start telling me their stories, kind of like your novel story, right? Like they all had different versions of stuff that was, kind of just kind of marinating, percolating in their minds, and stuff they wanted to do. And they were very much at the very, very beginning, but it you could see that they, even just by verbalizing it, you know, kind of became in their awareness, which was really cool, because you're just like, oh, this is cool. This is just by you doing your own thing, you could kind of see people's wheels start to turning, and they would just tell me crazy stories and like things that they'd never even, told their spouses, and yeah, some of them were like, quite disruptive. And I think some of those environments would have been very disruptive, but that was a really cool thing to kind of see people come alive. And
Yeah, you're like you're revealing vulnerability when you make a move like this. When you do a career transformation, you take on so much risk and uncertainty, and you're going for it. People who want to do that can empathize, and you become this example, this bridgehead for them to even consider doing it. It's analogous to sharing any other kind of vulnerability, let's say on social media, where you go up there and you say, I remember I had a period of insomnia after I had a rough romantic breakup, and usually I sleep like a rock. And going through this horrible phase, I literally couldn't sleep. Like days, weeks are going by. I was getting an hour of sleep a night. And I posted on social media, anyone know cure-alls for insomnia? And literally dozens of people publicly in the comments and privately in DMs were saying, I haven't been able to sleep in years. Here's what I do: melatonin, here's my new diet. And I never knew ever that these people that I had been fairly close to for decades, sometimes going all the way back to high school, were chronic insomniacs. No clue. And now that's on the downside in terms of, having these ailments. But people open up to you opening up. And when you show vulnerability, people show their own vulnerability. So all of a sudden you're not alone. And whether you have a chronic or acute condition, and people creep out of the woodwork to share their own experiences with that same kind of ailment, if you take that leap off that career ledge and you say, nope, I'm done and I'm going to really try something new, and you jump, whether you have the bungee cord secure or not, other folks standing on that ledge are going to cheer you on, and it's going to help them take the leap. And conversely, I don't know if you've encountered this too, you're going to elicit a lot of contempt, maybe fueled by jealousy, but this feeling of almost, I hope you fail. And you're just a brash moron for doing this. You're irresponsible, you're childish, you're atavistic emotionally, and you are just being irresponsible. I've gotten both kinds of feelings, which is this implicit support, pats on the back, but I have also gotten a lot of heat, both overt and covert, suggesting that they knew all along, A, that I would fail, and B, that there was this lurking childishness that they always sensed. And well, there you go. I knew you would jump off that cliff.
Yeah. I think, yeah, when you look at like, if financial is your only, judge of success, then maybe not, right? Um, but and that's like by and large like how people view really like any success for any endeavor. But if you're actually really enjoying the experimentation and you really see where it goes, like that's super powerful, and that's like something that only you can own. um I think there's also not a lot of people who share. We get a lot of the kind of BS success stories that are after the fact success in the financial side, right? But
Yep.
sharing those vulnerable stories is just, it's one of the coolest things. Like like your insomnia story, or I actually haven't had too many people come come out of the woodwork, kind of in a negative light. But yeah, it's there's just, we would just wait to tell those stories in the end. We're like, well, where are the ones in the middle, right? And as a human, one of the really kind of screwed up things for human beings is there's a protective element, right? Like we want to not trust someone because they got fired, right? Like it just innately, if a human, I remember reading this, if human, we perceive someone else needs something, our innate human mindset is to attribute some danger to our own existence and actually not help that person, right? So I think it's easy to see that, when you're looking at like those stories, right? I just don't think we have a lot of examples for people who are sharing that stuff that's really in the messy middle. That's honestly might be one of the coolest and most beautiful times. But then, it's kind of like having a child. You're like, someone will ask you like, well, what was it like? I don't remember. Like then you get to the
Yeah.
other side and you're like, well, where's the story? You're like, and it's not really even like properly encapsulated because you didn't really tell it, right? So you just think back and you go, that was really hard. But
100%. We take stuff for granted. In nature, the most exciting places, if you will, experiences, if we will, are in the phase transitions, the singularities between one state and another. That could be, ice turning slowly to water. That's a more banal example. A more extreme example is the Schwarzschild radius of a black hole, right? What's inside a black hole? Nobody knows. What's outside the black hole? Well, the whole friggin' universe. But at that singularity, at that boundary line, that point of no return is where all the action happens. And to your great point, we take for granted these transitional phases and we just look at the milestones. Like you start your career and then you're an agency CEO, or you flip your agency and you walk with $5 million, and it's celebrated. On social media, what do you see? Cats, food, and fancy cars and boats. People show off the most banal of things, and they also show off their big showy successes. But how they got there, the story behind it, the lawsuits, the fired colleagues, the agonizing all nighters, that's kind of brushed to the side as just the necessary pain that we ignore, that we go through for the big win at the end. You win that award. You have that nest egg, and you work your whole life only to save enough money. So what? So you don't work anymore? So that what? You disengage from life? You travel the world? What exactly are we striving for? And when you're in this transition, even that's called into question. And if for no other benefit than that, leaping off that cliff could be a great thing, especially mid to late in life.
Yeah, I think just going back to the ego stuff, right? In the worst case scenario, I think oftentimes we have so much, and it really is, it's that worst case scenario. That's a terrifying place, right? But in the grand scheme of things, like your bottom, in the worldwide scale is not that bad, right? Like you're crazy risk taking, doing all these things and like being true to yourself. The worst case scenario for you is like you're gonna be all right, you
That
know?
that's that's so insightful. I made an observation, and I made a few posts and video rants in a blog about everyone looking at things arithmetically. So an arithmetic scale from, let's say, 0 to 100. Let's say you look at your net worth, your success, your equity in financial terms, and 0 is emaciated poverty. You're the lowest caste person in Bangladesh on the street. That's a 0. And 100 is Musk or Bezos or Zuckerberg. Now, normally and arithmetically, you would probably put yourself at what? Maybe a 1 or a 2. Clearly, you're not starving to death, and your health is more or less okay, and you have a roof over your head. But compared to the big guys, you're nothing. But the truth is exactly as you described, Torrey, which is it's more logarithmic. So it's exponential. So you, if you think about it, are way closer to the Bezos, Musks, and Zuckerbergs in terms of your everyday life. You eat well, you have health care, you have a roof over your head, you're able to get to where you need to go. And my father used to say, how many steaks can you eat in a day, right? How much of all that excess is truly excess? And what do we really need as human beings to flourish and be happy? It's that Maslow triangle, right? You need your basics, but the stuff that gets higher and higher up the pyramid, where the layers get more and more narrow and focus, have less to do with money and power and more to do with self-actualization. Good old self-actualization. Was your day good or bad? Do people love you? Do people care about you? And are you able to creatively express yourself in a way that's satisfying and that makes you enjoy life? You can't put a price tag on that. So going back to what you're saying, I consider myself more an 8, 9 on this logarithmic scale. My eyes are bad, for example. I've congenitally bad vision. I can't drive. Compared to a blind person, though, I am gold. So when people say, like, "Oh, it's spits, it's so bad, you're so handicapped by your bad vision," well, I can see, and that places me on this scale closer to an 8 or 9 compared to an F-17 fighter pilot than someone who is stone cold blind. And I think that perspective is very, very important. And it's foundational to our ability to make these changes because, to your exact point, even if you do take that leap off a cliff, and even if you go into debt, you owe the IRS money, your assets are dwindling for the sake of taking this kind of career risk, for the sake of transforming yourself. That's nothing in comparison to the bigger picture of all the pain that's in the world. And frankly, our privilege as bougie Americans used to a cush middle class life, that it's almost laughable compared to the risks that billions of people are taking across the planet and our overall quality of life, which is exponentially higher than 95% of every creature on Earth, right?
Yeah, I think those the labels are powerful. The labels and the identities are powerful. Um, I was talking to it. There was a kid who was like a family friend of ours, and he was just fresh out of college. A lot of folks don't know what they want to do. He clearly wanted to be a writer. It was very obvious. Um, and he's like, well, no, I ended up, kind of going back and working, like kind of working through the family business, and just he was kind of just recounting kind of the reasons. There's a lot of these kind of societal, the optics of it, not going to make any money, even in a case where he really didn't have any obligations, right? That the stakes weren't even that high, right? Like he was just a single guy with a girlfriend, basically. And the reasons that he wouldn't pursue writing, which was wild. And I remember just telling him, I'm like, hey, I'm 15 years out of this career. I'm having to kind of, figure stuff out. Like, if you need to just go. Because the worst case scenario is like, it was, let's be honest, like it was only 4 years ago you were living in your family's like bonus room. So, you know, go be a writer for a couple years. And the worst case scenario is like, okay, you might end up in the bonus room, but you're not
Yeah.
willing to roll the dice, right? And
Yeah, yeah. What is the worst thing that can happen? Well, bankruptcy. Well, that sucks, but you can at least be bankrupt and look back at the year, 2, 3 years that precipitated your bankruptcy and say to yourself, you know what? I gave it my best shot. And you will go to the grave not thinking to yourself that your dumbass went bankrupt, but that you took that risk. The number one regret that they find from people that they talk to, near their dying days, is not doing what they always wanted to do. That survey comes up. You see that documentary. You see that little testimonial all the time, and I believe it. I believe it from people I know who've been at the brink. I feel it in myself as I get older that, to your great point, if not now, when? Make that move and incur that risk and take that leap. We can all be dead tomorrow. And again, to your point, what's the worst thing that can happen? And what I have discovered in terms of this transitional phase that I'm going through is that, again, it's hardship engenders creative solutions you otherwise wouldn't have pursued. So, another benefit, and although this sounds like a rationalization, I really don't think it is. Another benefit of feeling the pinch of the walls closing in financially, of the walls closing in terms of what your peer group thinks of you making that leap. Another benefit of feeling that constraint is that it forces you to think out of the box in ways you never would have. The AI industry experienced an earth-shattering seismic shift and shock a couple weeks ago with DeepSeek, the Chinese company that managed to train a large language model for 1/100th the cost of what the standard was. And this precipitated the plunge of Nvidia by $500 billion in about 48 hours. And the industry is still shaken up by this upstart Chinese hedge fund driven company that developed this technology that made AI more efficient and forced the entire model to be reevaluated, that we need bigger, faster, stronger chips to do AI. And although the jury's out on exactly how much money they spent to create their own model and train it, there's no doubt that they did this because they were forced to do it because they didn't have the most advanced NVIDIA chips. So even on the highest level of the most trend-setting, innovative technology, this idea that constraints engender creativity is true. And when you're cush and sitting back with all that firepower, you're not really motivated to streamline what you're doing to be more efficient, and you take for granted what's necessary to accomplish your goals. And because we embargoed the Chinese, they were put in a position where they had to think out of the box and be a little bit commando about it. And in doing so, upended the entire industry. And as a creative person, I'm finding that the same rules apply to humble little bald-headed me now in Orange County, California, where, I've got limited resources. I'm not a big agency guy. So guess what? You've got all these apps, you've got all these tools. I used to consider myself a writer, alphanumeric, writing novels, writing blogs. And what I discovered out of necessity was that I could go on TikTok, I could create these podcasts, and I can create my own Mookie Spitz distribution engine. Will I be successful? Will I tip the scales? Will I be able to monetize to the extent that I experienced the quality of life that I had before? I don't know. But the fact that I was a writer and I decided to write novels and sequester myself and shift my gears, and the money was running out, in a sense, forced me to jump on TikTok, think of new ways to express my ideas. And lo and behold, for the amount of energy and time that I put into a blog post on Medium, I could spend literally 5 minutes from my kitchen, post a video on TikTok, and literally get hundreds, sometimes thousands of people engaging and responding within 24 hours. Some of my videos have gone viral with just as much effort. And who knows, this could actually help my writing career because the two angles and this multi-channel approach feed off of each other. So, long story longer, taking a leap isn't just about the risk. And it's not only about overcoming the opportunity costs of not doing what you always wanted to do, but you find yourself solving problems that you never knew you had. And in solving these problems, it opens up all sorts of doors for new possibilities you never even thought about in the exact area that you wanted to thrive in the whole time.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the who knows. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? And if you got that attitude, that's really central to it. One enormous and erroneous idea that a lot of people have, and I think it's the biggest impediment, and I'm curious what you think about it, is this idea of almost instantaneous reward. When we were in the agency world, we juggled multiple clients, and we based our success on this project and that project, and we were in this whirl of activity. So there was a direct correspondence between effort and return. And when you're transitioning and when you're experimenting, you're often operating in a vacuum. You get people who ignore you. You're not getting compensated proportionally to your effort, and sometimes it's horrendously disproportionate, right? You can pour yourself into something and really gain ostensibly nothing from your effort, but you need to realize that you're doing it for yourself and not for anyone else. And if you could stick to that attitude that I'm doing things that satisfy myself, and eventually people might notice, and eventually it might even monetize, then that's the ticket to ride, instead of taking the opposite point of view that I'm doing this to make money. And if I don't make money, then it's a failure.
Yeah. There was a bunch of stuff to unpack there. I'm gonna have to do a. I'm gonna have to do a.
I'm ranting a little bit, but you've
I'm gonna have to do a.
inspired me with my own story too, which I think is entwined with yours, which is just going for it. That's one of the great things about the country we live in too, which is like you can reinvent yourself. Like, let me take the opposite example, like Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon crumbled in disgrace with Watergate. And he pretty much, I remember that image of him flying out for the last time in the helicopter from Washington, his wrinkled head hunched over, and he was done forever. And then within a few years, he was considered the elder statesman of American politics. George Bush Jr., after the horrific Iraq war, right? He was a disgrace to himself and his party. And I remember him coming on the late night show and being applauded. Like, there he is. There's the guy. So America is a country of transformation. And although reputation is everything, we're now in the digital age where everyone's got the memory of a fly anyway, and nobody cares. So if no one remembers and nobody cares, go ahead and fail. Go ahead and blow it. You know what I mean? Like, crash and burn. And they'll talk about you and they might denigrate you, but they're too busy worrying about their own stuff. And they probably never really cared about you in the first place. So go ahead and take the risk, because whether you succeed or fail, everyone's focused on themselves anyway. And I take certain amount of inspiration from that, which is regardless of how people look at me or what I do, and I'm sure it's the case for you and everyone else. It's really up to you and on you. And the only judge that you need to concern yourself with is yourself. And the only criteria that you need to take in that evaluation is whether or not you gain satisfaction from the stuff you do each and every day.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just ingrained in our society, right? It's the question that everyone asks you. It's what do you do? You know? So right from the onset, you're kind of like pigeonholed there and kind of put I don't know, I just found so much personal growth now around all of this stuff that I've just tried to cut through all of that now, and I just kind of describe things, well, I used to do this and this is kind of like what I'm doing right now, but it's not my defining element, and I've even found getting into that relatively quickly with folks has just led to such better, authentic, interactions. But I wanted to come back to one point that you mentioned, because I think this is one that I do really struggle with this, and coming from the kind of tech world or corporate world where you're the productivity cycle thing, where we're very a lot of stuff is kind of in our control to do. We can do a lot of things in a given day. And I think you also kind of attach that to your self-worth around like, well, look how many actions I got done. And it's not your company, right? But you have certain successes or things along the way which are like helpful. But I think there's this really, when you're on your own, and I'm curious to, you mentioned it about, you're pouring a ton of effort in. One thing that I really struggle in, I'm curious to get your feeling on this too, is kind of when is enough, right? There's some guardrails in there when it comes to working at a company and doing stuff and working really hard on stuff, and then you kind of find like, and I've just started to look back and think, am what I doing now like just part of this kind of pattern or habit that I picked up, or is this genuinely helpful? And kind of that question of kind of what is enough, when have we done enough? And I think we're kind of taught this incorrect kind of fallacy, which is this: keep pouring as much effort in as possible, right? Like keep adding do one more thing, one more, and I know logically it makes sense, right? Okay, crank out one more blog post, do one more video rant. And we're taught to just do more of those things. But I really struggle with that. And I'm curious if you also struggle with that, which is kind of like when there's no guardrails and you are in this expansive space, how do you kind of like be okay with yourself that you have done enough? And I just struggle a lot with that, coming from kind of the technology world, which everything is kind of optimized for productivity, churning stuff out, optimizing people. I'm curious to hear your feelings on it.
That's a great question. And this might be an expression of my own implicit biases. And to your point, the pedigree for both of us is in digital communications, digital strategy, digital implementation. Everything's happening at 90 miles an hour, and you got to keep cranking, cranking, cranking. It's fast, fast, fast. And I'm taking that same approach to content creation now. I've got something like 430 blogs on Medium. I've just cranked up these podcasts, and in a course of a week, I've got 9, 10 of them already up there. I think this is the ninth or the 10th one when when I set my heart and mind on something, I just let the tsunami bust out. And on TikTok, I've had some success. I started only 2 months ago. I've got 15,000 followers and 210,000 likes and viral videos and all this bullshit. These are just metrics, but I'm reiterating your observation that we are born into this manic frenzy of doing shit. And I think that this is positive. I think that the only way that you can make it as a creative person is to throw shit against the wall and see if it sticks. It's the Silicon Valley model of break things and see what happens, right? Break things, fix them, break things, fix them. And it's the epitome of the agile approach, the agile methodology, which is fail fast and keep moving quickly. And I will admit, as I said, early on here, that it could be an implicit bias or it could be a mistake. Maybe one glorious video post or one genius blog will get noticed. Last year, I self-published with a creative partner of mine on Amazon, and it was a screenplay that we had written years ago. I got it into my head that we could turn it into an adult book. And really the trigger point and catalyst for my creative resurgence late in life has been that book, writing that book and self-publishing on Amazon. But unfortunately, that creative partnership disintegrated because he did not have this same vision that I have, which is content, content, content. If you really commit to re-engineering your career, then the onus is on you to take this shit seriously. And I think this is a very important point to make. So whether I'm successful or not in my video ranting and blogging and self-publishing on Amazon, well, the important point is that I am determined to make it so. And with that determination comes a relentless hunger and eagerness to wake up in the morning and be a content creator. In easier terms, if more vulgar, don't fuck around, or fuck around and find out. It's like, if you want to be that thing, then do that thing. And as I mentioned, I had this kind of breakdown with my creative partner on that book because he had a different vision of success. He saw this self-publishing and this content creation as just a fun hobby. So as buddies, we just hang out and every once in a while we do some cool shit. And I was determined to make it transformative. And I'm still determined to make this transformative. Will I be successful? I don't know. But without this relentless determination, this insatiable hunger, and without this manic work ethic of cranking content, I can't see how it would even be possible in this crazy, busy, crowded space of everyone self-publishing, self-creating, being an influencer. You got to fight for your right to party. Remember that song? And if you want to be a creative person, and I'm just looking at it from the vantage point of a content creator, you have no alternative but to dedicate yourself completely and kick ass 120%. And if you don't have that determination to succeed and that work ethic and that maniacal focus, I can't imagine anyone being able to pull this off. So to answer your question, I think if you take that leap off that cliff, you cannot do it like this winsome poet, smoking herbs and meditating and creating a haiku once every 2 weeks. It ain't gonna happen. So if you go for it, then go for it and try different stuff, experiment, fail. But if you do go bankrupt in a few years, or if you do win the Pulitzer Prize, you could look back and say, you know what? Success or fail, I gave it my all. And you're going to have to give it as much, if not more, than what you gave in your ostensibly more traditional career, because it's so much harder to do. You know, no one's gonna give this shit to you. It's like you wake up one morning, I'm gonna give up that 9 to 5 and that steady paycheck, and I'm just gonna be the creative person that I've always wanted to be. Well, you know what? The universe is gonna say, fuck you, because everyone wants that. Go to the most conventional, conservative, traditional 9 to 5 time clock punching guy or gal, and deep in their heart, they have the novel they always wanted to write, the screenplay they always wanted to write, the song they always wanted to perform, and then they sit on those Sunday mornings and think about when they did that high school performance, and oh, wouldn't it have been great if they would have pursued their acting career. There's not a single human on the planet who doesn't sometimes ruminate this way. But what differentiates people who actually are able to pull it off from people who don't is this kind of zeal. And if you don't have it, then keep your day job. And I think that that's a critical point to make. This isn't like taking the easy route. It's actually taking the fucking difficult one. And if you don't have the determination or stamina, and if you don't believe in yourself, and if you just think it's a hobby while you do your other stuff, it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, maybe I'll just make a distinction and say I think there's so when you're in a space like you're in, which is it's a little bit more refined from like a creative standpoint, right? Like there is that thing versus oh, I'm trying to figure out. There's a bunch of different things. You want to do something different. That to me recently has been more polarizing, just because I've come out of basically. So I start flash back slightly to the story and go back to the pest control business. Um, in the pest control business, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then my wife left her job kind of in the summertime when I just launched. So we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do here? And I think when I had the focus of, okay, this is what I'm going to go and do, and that was easy to kind of go full steam ahead. Now we're kind of back in the States, flash forward, and kind of like I have an objective on what I want to do, but it's still very expansive, right? So this is a very trying time where I'm trying to figure out, because there are so many options. Like I'm looking at maybe buying a small business, maybe starting a business, something different, like a coffee roastery, or buying like a small service-based business locally. I think that's a different, you know, uh, earlier kind of on the continuum, but I would 100% agree with you. When you kind of make the decision to go for it, you kind of need to like pour everything into that thing, sink or swim, figure out how things are going to shake down. What new things do you discover along the way? And I think that's like, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's more in the, how do you handle when you're in that contemplative stage, or, okay, well, what do I pursue? How do I do it? And I would go back to like, maybe being creative is slightly different, because when you are in those creative moments, it's kind of on you. You really like, if you're going to choose that as a thing, then when you get the inspiration at 3 a.m., you better be making a rant. Like that's what you've chosen, right? Like it's on you to produce that thing, especially when you get different inspiration. I just would go back and say, like, I particularly struggle a little bit now with, which is just coming from the tech background and kind of going without having that thing where I'm going, okay, I'm doubling down. This is the business. This is the thing. I'm kind of like right before that right now, and just kind of struggling with that. And just being okay. Like it creates a weird vibrational thing for myself where I don't know. It's almost like I lost the ability to relax. When it's only your thing, and it's kind of like, well, you could work to discover businesses all night long, right? But I think there's something valuable too in the other side of that coin, right? Which is you're going, I think when you have that creative passion, you can do it 100%. I do think there's some kind of a balance before that where you do need to give yourself time and space. And if you're stressing about ticking all these things off of your to-do list, or doing these things, or comparing yourself to someone else who's doing all this other more stuff than you, it's just kind of a challenge. But I would agree with you as far as the creativity and just letting it rip is from a creative standpoint is spot on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make that distinction between exploration and discovery. What is the thing that will rock my boat? What gets to the core of who I am as a person, as a productive human? And how can I express that in a way where I'm engaged with the world and the world reciprocates by being able to support me to do what I love? So these are two different things. That said, though, in that exploratory discovery phase, you do need relaxation and calm. You got to chill out. I think what you were getting at is I'm used to this manic frenzied pace, and that manic frenzied pace creates a lot of agitation. It's based and fueled by anxiety. Like you got to keep cranking. You got to keep cranking. And that might preclude that light bulb from going off like, wow, now I know what I want to do. And the only way to get there is sometimes through calm rumination and understanding who you are. But that's, I think, what's key. Now that you're exploring, you're in discovery, it's not just a random crapshoot. It's not just, walking the earth like Caine in Kung Fu and seeing what adventures unfold. I think you're beyond that state. I think it sounds to me like you've transitioned out of your traditional role, which you've had for 10, 15 years. You lived in Thailand for a while with your family, which, it'd be wonderful for me to hear more about and our listeners to get a gist of. And you're at that point where you're ready for the next adventure. However, what the hell is that adventure? What is that pursuit that fires me up, that motivates me to my core, and that I can self-identify with in a way where I don't feel like I'm punching the clock? And I think the answer to that is not just calm rumination. It's not just chilling out and being like Cain and wandering from village to village and getting in adventures. It's soul searching and asking yourself, really, what are your strengths? What, even in your past 10, 15 years, have you loved to do? What are you fucking great at? This goes back to that strengths finder. Remember that evaluation that was really, really popular about like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where you have the 33 traits that all human beings have. You take the test, 5 of them percolate up to the top. And then if those 5 things are aligned with what you're doing in your job, or if you can get your job to align with those 5 traits, whether learning is the most important thing, command, empathy, woo, right? Planning. If you're aligned innately, your traits, born, the DNA, the nucleosides programming the proteins that bubble up into your behavior, if those 5 traits match with your job, or if you can get your job to match with those 5 traits, then you're happy and productive. Well, I think they were onto something. Screw your weaknesses, ignore everything you suck at, and focus on what you are great at. Because chances are the shit that you're great at is the same shit that you love doing. For that reason, I'm really good at this, so I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it, so I do it a lot. I do it a lot, so I get even better at it. I get even better at it, so I really love doing it. It is the ultimate positive feedback loop. And if you could do that evaluation in your time of exploration and discovery, then that's what it's all about. Now's the time to do it. And I think that that's a great place to start, which is figuring out your true loves and adapt those to things that you do. As far as I'm concerned, I love writing. I love ideas that pop into my ADHD head, and I love transferring these ideas to alphanumeric bangs on my keyboard in terms of writing, blogs, short stories, screenplays, novels. I love that. And I've also discovered by want of necessity that I'm actually pretty good at and have a lot of fun, making videos of myself expressing these 1 to 2 minute bursts of opinion about everything from politics to culture to quirky things that I have found in my life. And now all of this is churning. I'll do a 1 or 2 minute rant on TikTok. I'll turn it into a blog. These same ideas will go into my novel. I'll have an idea while writing my novel that turns into a blog, that turns into a rant. So I have this like new multi-channel form of expression, which is a minute to minute, hour by hour, day to day churn of ideation, expression, and creativity. I kind of found myself in this swirl of all this stuff. And it's good for me. I love it. Have I been able to monetize it? Not really. But it fills me with such a level of self-satisfaction that regardless of what I do to eventually not go bankrupt, I will keep doing this. Oh boy, lucky me. And on the one side, this sounds like, a jerk off. I'm just boasting, but I'm not. I'm just illustrating that after years and years of trying to find myself, I think I have. And that helps me kind of endure the hardships of leaping off that ledge. And if I can give you any kind of solace, it's doable. Have I attained nirvana? No, because I'm still struggling with the basics, at least financially, and trying to flip this in terms of anything that could pay the rent and support my family. But at the same time, I hope it inspires you and anyone else listening that it's inside you. And if you take this time to self-evaluate and find that, then that is your ticket to ride to your next step, your next career, and the next cool thing that you can do for yourself, for your family, and for the planet. Because the Torrey I know is a super cool cat who has a lot of unique qualities that the world needs more of.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think one last note on the on we don't really know how that story is going to end, right? And maybe it was one rant, or one thing or one small blog post. Like I think back to, like, by financial means, like my pest control, wasn't a success. Like I broke even in my first, I didn't, make a crazy amount of profit. I broke even in my first year. And but now that thing is now a huge piece of when I'm going out and looking at, potential businesses. And they're asking me, okay, well, do you have you worked in the service industry? What do what experience do you have? And it's like, well, I left tech in 4 months, got certified, launched my own company, and had a pest control up and running, and it's, by all, like, when I was in that space, there was so many things coming to me saying, I would say more societal reasons to not do it. Um, but I don't think you would trade it, right? Like, and on the end of this, like, whether it's gonna work out, whether it's financially, or these things are archived and you can pick up parts of them at some point, they exist, and who knows what tendrils kick off of even just one, so I think putting that stuff out there, but it's only after the fact. And I probably had, 90% was don't do it, don't start a seasonal business. It's up in the air, but I had passion to do it. So it's like, well, I owe it to myself to do that. Same thing for you. It's like you owe it to yourself to do it. You have to let whatever that thing, you got to let whatever that thing is out.
Yeah,
And
go with your hunch. You're an entrepreneurial kind of guy. You're very engaging. People love working with you. You're bright, creative, and it's fun. My memories of Torrey, here's a fun cat, gets it done. And that's a huge strength. That's like 2 out of 5 of your strength finder attributes right there. Torrey is fun and he gets shit done. That's almost a byline for a tacky campaign, right? Put that on your
exactly.
business card. That's a great start. And to your point about the Naked Lunch pest control business that you've started, you never know what can hit. You know what I mean? So, for example, this is just my own little example. I did a series of rants on TikTok, and they get anywhere from 3 to 800, 900 views. I get like 20, 30, 70 likes, and a few people commenting. There's trolls. There's people who are abusive. There's also people who give me a thumbs up. But every once in a while, for no damn reason, I'll have one of these go viral. So the other night, I record 3 or 4 of these like I normally do during the course of the day. An idea pops in my head. I jump in my kitchen or I'm taking a walk. I'll record myself, post it. It's really effortless, like I mentioned, with pretty good engagement given the tiny amount of effort I put into them. So I'm ready to go to sleep. It's late. I don't sleep much. I'm kind of a vampire. It's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm exhausted. And then this idea pops into my head that mass deportations are stupid because the facts and figures are swirling in my head. I know that it's top of mind. I know that the new administration is focused on that. And for all these reasons, I personally, based on the data alone, think that the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants is frankly bad for the economy, bad for the country, and it's horrible even from a humanitarian point of view. So this idea pops into my head. I run it, I grab a polo shirt and a dirty one. I jump into my kitchen, I flick the light on, and I just do a 2-minute rant on this. I caption it for another 5-10 minutes, and that was only a few days ago, and it's at nearly 500,000 views with 40,000 likes and 4,000 comments, reshared 7,000 times on TikTok. Now, am I a political genius? No. I'm just some bald guy ranting in his kitchen. But what I'm using this to illustrate is that I have a passion for bloviating. I have a big fucking mouth, which has gotten me a lot of benefits in the business world, but also led to cataclysmic problems. People know me in the business world. Spitz has a big mouth. Well, guess what? Now I'm exercising the muscles in my face in a way that's really fun. And the worst thing that can happen is people mute me, delete me, or leave a mean comment. Who gives a shit? But what's happened is 3, 4, 5, 6 videos, 10, 11, 12, 20 videos. One of them is gonna pop. And you have no idea which one it is and how it's going to be. And I think this is the best advice to give anyone starting out fresh, reinventing themselves. You never know what's going to flip it for you. Anthony Bourdain was a very unsuccessful cook for years in New York City. He had abuse problems. He kept getting fired. And by his own estimation, he wasn't even that good at his job. He wrote an essay, Kitchen Confidential. I think it ended up getting in the Atlantic. I forgot where it was published originally. But if you read Anthony Bourdain's singular little essay on what it's like working in a kitchen and the relationship between the hot, steamy struggle of the cooks in the kitchen to the guests in the room who received this fabulous, opulent meal, you know, that kind of reciprocal relationship and how the one feeds the other is fucking brilliant. And that was the tipping point for the career of Anthony Bourdain. It was an essay. But did that come out of nowhere? Is that an overnight sensation like Frank Zappa used to joke about? No, the guy had been writing for years. He was an intellectual. He had abuse problems, but he was erudite, he was well read, he was as social and engaging as you've seen him on TV. But that was the flip point. That was the tipping point. So describing what you're describing, Torrey, it's like you're starting this, you know, this company, or this company had ambiguous results. The only thing that I can recommend, which is not only preaching to the choir, but preaching back to myself in terms of trying to give myself inspiration at this transitional moment, just keep doing what you're doing. And if you keep doing it, one of the things that you do, whether it's a new business, whether it's a new contact, whether it's just some random moment in your pursuit of your new career, is going to go supernova. And in retrospect, I could look at that mass deportations are stupid video, and what about it? Well, it's coherent, it's cogent, it makes some good points. But who the fuck knows? It just happened. It's magic. It's like Casablanca. It's like Star Wars. Sometimes you just throw random elements together. But the point is, you don't win the lottery unless you keep buying tickets. And if you're pursuing a new career or if you're exploring yourself, this goes back to what I was saying before. Don't be like my former creative partner who considers it a hobby. Dedicate yourself, focus yourself, and apply all your energy to your goal and create and do it. And something is going to snap.
Oh, 100%. I think one just practical advice that's come up for me kind of through all my transitions and all that stuff that's been really helpful is I think it is helpful to have, and I want to vomit in my mouth when I even say like an accountability partner. Like obviously you can get someone like that to help you out with, and I think that can have its place. But one thing that was helpful for me is, when you just come up with different ideas, I think we as humans also have a way to overcomplicate things. And you would be surprised that just by asking someone else, like just come up with whatever the ideas that you want to experiment with. But when it comes up to our own plans, sometimes they're just concocted. And I think, Mike, you might be an anomaly. You might be an exception to this, but I think we have generally a sense of overcomplicating the execution, to a crazy level. Like I have a friend of mine, and through this whole transition, I mentioned something about what I was doing, and he basically came back and said, "Actually, you know what? Like, it'd be awesome to be, start making wine." I was like, "Oh, really? You want to make wine?" He's like, "Yeah, but it's too hard to. I got to go all the way out to Napa and all this stuff." And he lives in New York, and I remember going, "You don't have to go to Napa. There's like 17 wineries within an hour here. Like, I'll take a Saturday and go with you to explore it." So, just one practical advice that could be helpful is don't try to like. It can be very lonely too when you're sitting there with your thoughts and you're trying to create something or you just have ideas. But just ask someone how they would do it. In my experience, that they will have an infinitely better way and less complicated way to execute on whatever this thing is sometimes than you would. And I think it just gets more into the fact of it. It lets you, get whatever that thing is out there faster. And it doesn't matter if it's financially successful. Obviously, that would be great. But it gets it out there faster in a way where you're not sitting on this idea forever because it requires some like insane amount of money to do, or it's too complicated, or the logistics don't work out. And there's just one piece of kind of practical advice that I would say would be helpful once you get to the stage of even having those kind of ideas in your periphery or in your awareness.
100%. And I think you brought up two separate issues that are conjoined. The first thing that you brought up is don't overthink it. This goes back to my throw the spaghetti against the wall, see if it sticks, fail fast, just keep moving. Break it, fix it, break it again. Blow up a bunch of rockets until you can get Starship, that kind of thing. The other thing that you're saying is don't just rely on your own stupidity. There are experts out there. There are people who have gone down the path that you are trying to go down, and you're not alone. So get some expert consultation. It could be informal. It could be more formal. If you need to pay for help, then go for it. But don't take the burden of this leap and these transformations on your own shoulders, because there's a lot of people. There's coaches. There's all this is an entire industry. The stuff that we're talking about is an industry of people who give advice on how to do exactly this, right? So you're not alone. So you're saying both at the same time, which is stay agile, don't overthink it, but at the same time, don't be independent and reckless to the point where you're not getting expert counsel when it could be useful.
Yeah, 100%. I think one other thing I would add too is we discount our own attitudes to how we go about the day, right? And how infectious that is, and how that one seemingly positive interaction, just your attitude to approaching creating content, and how you define success, I think is that's that is the confident thing that's happened. That's been one big thing for me where I think I went through a lot of my career is like was kind of proving myself over and over again, and then you kind of realize you never really get there. And then it's more about like there's a lot more power in the kind of vulnerability. And that's just been, even now when I have conversations with folks, I think in the past that I would have been much more, guarded against or tried to like create some create some story about myself. And I mean, I have a few talking points, right? But the reality is that I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if I'm going to buy a business. I don't know if I'm going to start a business. But I don't want to waste the time. When I look back, I'm just looking at this moment in time, and it was helpful going back to speaking about, when Renee's dad passed away, my father-in-law. Um, it's just the journey is short, right? So when you think about, I know there's a lot of external pressures, and you're talking about financial pressures and people's opinions and all that stuff. But, when you're going through this, whether it takes 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, multiple years, whatever, if your attitude towards it is terrible and you waste that time, that's just, I mean, you're kind of giving up all these different present moments, for this magical future that doesn't exist. And I think that attitude is very infectious. It's
Yeah,
very like,
totally.
for you to be able to talk about all your stuff in a way like it I mean, for me, it doesn't, I don't attribute the financial success. Like, I'm not a binary, like that doesn't pass fail. I've already found a lot of inspiration just, kind of sitting with my ear to the ground as the stuff that you've been doing, which has been amazing. But that attitude is just, I think it's worth its weight in gold. It's the real vulnerable, real human interactions that I think everyone craves. But we kind of hide behind, like, if you're not going to let that thing out, you're too scared, you're going to play it safe, you're going to sit here and not do that stuff. And like you said, the data's already there. Like, if you're going to look back, you're going to be like, man, I didn't even roll the dice one time. I never did it. Like, I never rolled the dice. I never did it. Okay, great. And then all your interactions too. It's like, okay, fine. Well, how much is that worth? If Mike, you tell me like I'm a digital tech influencer, all this stuff, but it's inauthentic to what you want to do. It's like, okay, if that's how you want to live your life, then, be my guest. But you're the one that has to sleep with yourself at night,
Yeah,
and
yeah, totally, totally. And I think at the heart of what you just said is the pursuit and insistence on perfection right out of the gate. And what that really means is I don't want to show any vulnerabilities. So if I'm going to make this move, if I'm going to write that novel, post that blog, start that business, do this rant on TikTok, any of the host of things that people want to do. Begin this new consultancy, invent this new widget, then the widget and the video and the business have to be absolutely perfect right out of the gate because otherwise I will fail and people will judge me. Well, that is lethal. It is lethal because simply you can't have anything pristine out of the gate because life is organic and the greatest things in life evolve from simple to more complicated things based on the ecosystem within which they flourish. The other thing is, it's the best excuse in the world to do nothing. I've known so many people who don't want to make a jump because they feel it's not good enough. And put, flipping that on its head, it's not a matter of being good enough, but just being willing to try and take risks. That's what it's all about. And the people I've known who've been successful are ones who have the confidence to believe in themselves and at the same time this willingness to stay flexible and just be shitty. Suck at what you do and don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid of failure. Embrace it and expect it. We all get punched in the face each and every day. You started this conversation saying that you logged how many times you had awful experiences in your traditional career role. 1,000 times a month, right? Every day. That sucked. That sucked. Well, you're pursuing the safe path, and people are punching you in the face, left and right, incessantly. Well, when you do your thing, when you start your pest company or whether you rant on TikTok, people are going to leave you mean comments and people are going to punch you in the face. Isn't it better to get punched in the face doing what you love than doing what you think you have to do? Isn't it better getting punched in the face so that you learn, you toughen up, and at the same time pay attention to why they're punching you in the face to actually get better at doing what you do. You don't start out perfect, you start out terrible. You don't start out with people pouring praise on you. You start out with a million objections and people telling you that you suck. And if you pay attention and at the same time hold the confidence that you're able to do this, you simultaneously learn, get better at the shit that you do, and eventually you can rock and roll and flip people's opinion and then make it on your terms and not someone else's.
Yeah, I think that's it's a certain type of person that wants to sign up for that rodeo. It's very much like a startup, mentality. Some days are great, some days suck. Like there's inefficiencies. There's no putting, at least where I'm at right now, there's no putting my head down, right? But I liked your point around getting punched in the face. Yeah, at least you're not asking why am I getting punched in the face right now,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
at the, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would implore you to accept and embrace getting punched in the face. Because whatever it is you're going to choose, even if it's in perfect alignment with your top categories of strengths, right? Torrey is fun. Torrey gets stuff done. Torrey is very creative. Torrey thinks out of the box. We can make a list of the Torrey strengths. Let's hypothesize that you get everything that you've always wanted. That does not mean it's going to be easy. In fact, if you're going to be successful at doing what you do in this less conventional, less traditional, new kind of way, then it's going to be really, really hard. And you got no choice but to accept that. The plus side is it's gonna be hard. Actually, it's probably gonna be even harder than your traditional day job that you left behind. But here's what makes it beautiful. You're doing what's in alignment with who you are, and you're doing it in a way which is self satisfying each and every day. And you're building equity in your own heart and mind in terms of the ledger that is your happiness and not the Excel spreadsheet of the person you're looking for and profiting off your work. Any way you cut it, you're going to be your own entrepreneur because you work for yourself. You work for your own happiness. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it's going to be even more challenging because whatever it is you're doing will probably be a little bit less conventional.
Yeah, I think one thing that resonates a lot is what you said. It's just having patience. We got to be steadfast enough to do what we want to do, but we have to have patience to see through. One connection's kind of funny thinking through the Thailand stuff that stuck with me. They had this phrase "sabai sabai." It's kind of like not too high, not too low. And
Right.
I never really been to a place that embodied like a different philosophical culture. Like I spent a lot of time living in Latin America. I lived in Costa Rica for 7 years, and but Thailand was just this really infusion of the Buddhist culture, right? And it was just beautiful to see people who really were living just in their moments, and just whatever was happening and not really attaching a lot of labels to it. So it's funny is even like that punch in the face, well, did you just interpret that as a punch in the face, right? And I wouldn't
Right.
go into anything thinking that it's going to be an easy road for sure. Nothing's going to be easy. I don't think I would want it to be super easy. It'd be just fucking bored, I guess. But yeah, it was beautiful to see how their culture kind of really just accepted what was there, and for people for doing what they wanted to. And it was also the first time really coming into like a very non-capitalistic society, right? It wasn't driven by all of the same kind of financial measures. It was just people kind of like living in that moment and kind of doing what it was just weird. It was weird to see. There's obviously currency, right? So people do stuff to get by, of course. There's people going above and beyond that. But it was my first time kind of seeing that, like, especially coming from the US, where a lot of them were just doing exactly what they wanted because they had what they wanted to do. So that was kind of powerful too, to just in both veins, like kind of reassurance that it's okay. And Thailand for me was a lot about just chilling out because I really couldn't execute. So that was another frustrating thing is I'm like, okay, I want to do this. And Thailand was amazing in many ways, but it was almost like another pause. It was hard. Time zones were hard. You couldn't get anything done. I couldn't even find a place. We like trying to coordinate finding places was a challenge when I was there for when we got back from the States. So it was a lot about like acceptance, and just being able to like be okay with what's there right now. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And like I said, just that perception of, yeah, it's not going to be a cakewalk, but you don't know what that punch in the face might be like just what you needed, right? And you're the only one who's going to interpret that punch like that, right? And so just philosophically was very, very cool to see. And so some of that stuff kind of stuck with me now, where it's been nice to transition in this phase. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of stuff's out of your control. Do what you can, enjoy what you have, and the limited things that you do have control over. And that's kind of stuck with me too, which is nice, because there will be those days where you're up and down and it's challenging, and but nothing's going to be easy, right? Like, we're not on planet Earth. Like, no one gets out and just says that was a cakewalk, right? Like,
Yeah, you bring up a central point here, which is what's the damn purpose? Like, and what is happiness? I was just in Vietnam over the holiday, and once again, huge cultural difference. The past 5 years, especially, the country seems to be really flourishing with an infusion of IT and tourism. They've opened stuff up. They welcome, not only Australians and Chinese and Russian, but even us Americans to come on in. There's Burger Kings and KFCs, and the dollar goes a long way. And there's that same kind of like, just get the day done, enjoy a moment in paradise, and don't kill yourself to live. There's also an old joke which I bring up a lot, where you have a fisherman on a pier in Puerto Vallarta or some city in Mexico, and he sees this American fellow show up with his fancy tackle box and sits next to him, and then they start chit-chatting, and then the Mexican fisherman goes, well, who are you? Why are you here? And then the American guy goes, well, I killed myself at my corporate job for 40 years, working nonstop 60 hours a week, so I could retire and finally take it easy. And then the Mexican fisherman sitting right next to him at the same pier, who's been there for those 40 years, goes, "Oh, okay, well, welcome. This is what I've been doing the whole time."
yeah,
So it's a tacky joke, and it's a little strained, and I'm sure people have told it much better than I just did, but it illustrates exactly what you're saying, which is why do you want to do what you do? And if you're making a career switch and you're gunning it, if you're gunning it and you're killing yourself and you're overworked and you're stressed out for some higher ideal or some better kind of projection of yourself in the working world, then aren't you doing the same damn thing you were doing before? I mean, get some sunshine, smell the coffee, and take it easy. And what's your ultimate goal? And the only thing I could say to that is, the reason that I'm enthusiastically taking these risks right now, and the reason that I'm constantly on and ranting on TikTok and writing blogs, and I want to publish my science fiction novel this week if I can for Valentine's Day. I have my goals, and all of these are internal deadlines and goals, and I'm a workaholic with not that much financially to show for it at this point, compared to my career and my continued career. I continue being a consultant. So, it's not like I've thrown in the towel on my actual work. So I still have clients, I'm still working, but I have shifted my portfolio, if you will, to a subsistence kind of existence, accruing debt, so I can be doing these other things. So, well, why am I doing these things? Well, and why am I taking on debt? And why am I taking these risks? Because it's intrinsically awesome for me. I would rather do nothing else than rant on TikTok, write blogs, and soon to publish my science fiction novel. So at the end of the day, if you're really pursuing happiness, you're not doing it for anything else except to self-actualize yourself and express yourself. And if you can align those two things, then I would much rather be in this frenetic state of screaming on TikTok and self-publishing on Amazon at this moment than sitting next to that fisherman on the pier at Puerto Vallarta. I would be bored and I would take out my phone and I would record a rant about some political idea. So I'm doing what I love. I'm doing what I enjoy. I look forward to it each and every day. Will I succeed or fail based on spreading this love and bullshit? Getting someone to notice my self publishing. I don't know. And you know what? This might be a brash statement, but I don't really care because day to day, I love this shit. And I'm confident if I love it, then maybe someone else will too. Bravo. That's it. No more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's really come through for me and seeing you create the content, right? Because we worked together and had a whole host of different interactions there. But I'll say one thing that really does come through is the passion, and I think it's an intangible thing, right? But I do think it's kind of an infectious thing, and people can tell. You can tell that when you put something out there, that you're kind of throwing your whole self in. I think that kind of thing is infectious and inspiring and awesome to see. I think we definitely need more of that. So I'm a huge fan. It's been hugely inspirational to me, especially like I said, in a time where there's not a lot of people. I don't have a good network of people going through that, with the exception of one other kind of resource that might be helpful is I read a book called The Pathless Path. This guy Paul Millard wrote it, and so I kind of like joined their community, and it's really like nothing, crazy revolution. It's a kind of good storytelling, but it kind of just postures this idea that it's not about finding that one thing, that one kind of icky guy purpose, which I don't know. I remember reading that book and thinking it was just like depressing. I'm like, I don't know. It was even worse off. I hadn't figured out what I wanted to do. I was like working, in tech, and now I was like, oh God, this is like my whole purpose of being is like this Japanese concept of ikigai, like what I want to do. But it's much more fluid, and it's about like experimentation. It's kind of a community of people who are taking a bunch of different leaps and doing a bunch of different stuff. And then I also got introduced to another interesting idea there where the guy kind of wrote the opposite of the icky guy. He's like calling it the octopus life. And it was just like this experimental, tentacles reaching out and touching something. So kind of the opposite approach of when you want to have that one thing and go ultra deep. And just through some of those readings and stuff was really interesting to see people go, well, screw that, like I don't want to spend all that's boring, I don't want to spend all my time doing this. And even for you, it's like maybe this is a burst of content creation that leads to something else. And it's like if you're either going to explore that or not. But that's one resource that's been, it's kind of a more fun, whimsical thing, but just to give you some community aspect, because I think it can be kind of lonely, when you're the only one there, you're the only one doing it. There may not be a playbook or a path. It's not a linear process to follow. And I found a little bit of support there, which has been fun. But if not, I haven't had like crazy super deep connections there, but I think it's been really supportive. And I even met up with one of the members when I was in Chiang Mai in Thailand, which was awesome, and getting to hear her stories and stuff like that. It was just really supportive to see people who go through it, but also from a really perspective changing approach. You hear other stories, and some of their change and personal growth is, I would say is a lot harder than mine. So it's just been a nice other kind of community, which if you're gonna try to make a change, just go back and say I'd recommend the Jenny Blake is a really called Pivot, which is a really good resource. And then on the community side, the Pathless Path is another cool one where it's just kind of a
Awesome.
community
Uh,
of people who don't kind of buy into the like long deep career kind of thing and are just trying to figure it out, and they have a mix of everybody there: content creators, writers, tech, all of it.
I'll put the links in the description so people can access these resources that you're recommending. And yeah, I'll agree that it's got to be a mixture of enthusiasm and confidence. coupled with energy and intensity and determination, because that stuff is contagious. Years and years ago, back in 1986 or so, I was friends with the singer Beck. He was 16 and I was 22, and we spent a summer being buddies. And I'll put the link to the blog post where I talk a little bit about that odd relationship and friendship. And the essence of it was the second he would meet anyone, and this is how he introduced himself to me, he would say, "Hi, I'm Beck, and I'm going to be famous." That's zero bullshit. That's how he introduced himself to me like that. When he introduced himself to others and to my friends, "Hi, I'm Beck, and I'm gonna be famous." The kid was 16 years old, and he had the blonde wispy hair. He wore those odd leisure suits, and he walked kind of funny, and he sang funny, and he was the Beck we all know and love. 16, inchoate, but he had that almost ridiculous level of confidence. Now, does that say that he made it because of that? No, there are millions of kids who claim to fame or want to be famous, but that's almost a prerequisite. If you don't have that confidence and that determination to be whom you think you are and accomplish that goal, no matter how unlikely, there's no way that it's going to happen. It doesn't just happen by accident. You need that confidence. You need to say, "I am Torrey, and I am going to X." And just like I say, I am Mookie Spitz, and I am a content mofo. I'm just tsunami of shit's coming out, folks. Grab some of it if you want it. That's who I am. That's who Beck was, and you need to, and you are exploring and discovering who you are. That's like phase one. And the other person I met more recently was Ezra Klein, who is now the opinion guy at the New York Times. I had a client in the WeWorks office down in the financial district in downtown Manhattan. And in that same building was the Vox Studio Network. So there were a bunch of folks going in and out, and Ezra Klein was in the lobby standing there one day. This was, again, a few years ago. This was prior to his New York Times career evolution. And I recognized him. And he's kind of a distinct looking guy. He's kind of skinny, little ground glasses. And I recognize him. He looks at me and knows that I have recognized him. And he gives me this look like, "Yeah, what are you going to do about it?" It was kind of provocative, and maybe I exuded this kind of like, "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" And he had this feeling of determination and busyness. People who are successful that I've met in, the traditional agency world, and in this case, Ezra Klein, relentless focus. This mofo was he couldn't wait to leap into that elevator, ride it to the top of the office, and dive into his next article, blog, or podcast. This guy was on fire. He didn't have time to give me the time of day. And with that implicit "fuck you" from Ezra Klein, I got the feeling really of what it takes to be Ezra Klein, which is, I am busy. I got shit to do. So if there's any takeaway that I've gotten over the years to being self-actualized and realizing your dreams, you need a Beck level of idiotic confidence in yourself. You need to truly believe that you are Beck and you will be famous. And you need Ezra Klein's maniacal energy and determination to make it happen. And when you put the two together, there's no guarantee of success. But without both, it's going to be really tough to crack that nut. Respectful silence.
Yeah,
Did
I.
I do this?
Well, I was actually just
that was my rant. So
yeah.
maybe that's a good capper. I don't want to. I would prefer you to cap this. We're almost at a couple hours, and I think this has been a wonderful conversation. Maybe let's have another in 6 months to see how we're doing in our respective career evolution. And I would love to just have you cap it in terms of of your feelings about where you are, where you can get to, and anything else you'd like to share with the listeners of the Bald Ambition podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we covered on a lot of stuff that's kind of, been in my, recent evolution. And I'm deep in it right now, right? Like I said, I was kind of pathless path interrupted. It's been nothing like I've planned. And I think that's a good thing, because, I think there's things that it can be out of our control, when you're trying to play it safe, like you can always have, insert some crazy health issue, et cetera. And it kind of blows up those plans. So, yeah, I'm just trying to, scratch and claw and grab resources and be kind of true to myself to this in this crazy transition, draw inspiration where I can. But I will say it's been much more of a personal growth experience for me. It was kind of tip of the iceberg on just this was just a career transition, and it's been much deeper. But I think with going through all of that work, I wouldn't trade it. And now when I look back, it wasn't by my own decision. I didn't decide to fire myself in January. But I look back at that time, and I'm so glad that it happened because now I look back, and despite all of the crazy challenges and ambiguity and all of that stuff, I think back about that time, and I'm so glad that it happened. Because you blink, and you're kind of you're one or two jobs away from like perceived retirement age, kind of, and like kind of missing on so many moments. So I'd say, despite all the craziness, ambiguity, I look back with a fondness of it. But yeah, hopefully those resources are helpful. I've also, like I said, drawn a bunch of inspiration, from Mookie's journey to, and again, I don't necessarily kind of change the way that I define success into, it has nothing really, very little to do with finance now, and a lot of other things. So yeah, appreciate you having me on. Hopefully those would help other people. I'm always available to help, anyone who's kind of going through a similar thing. So maybe I'll drop my contact info too if someone's wanting help on something, or want to get new resources or an update, or just help as they're kind of going through a transition. So
Or maybe offer you some support, right? I go, hey, Torrey, I heard you on the Bald Ambition podcast, and I've got a business opportunity for you. Why not, right? That's what it's all about. So you can leave your contact info. I'll put it in the description. We welcome any and all feedback, and it's really an ongoing conversation. And if nothing else, it just shows how our identity, our branding, our differentiation as people translate not only into our career choices, but in how we want to live our lives. And to your great point, it's never too old. I grew up where, if you're 50, you were half dead already. And now, we've got presidents in their 70s and 80s, and we've got, Clint Eastwood. He's like, how old is he? And he's still doing movies. It's the opposite of ageism, that we were never designed to live past 25 anyway. The rest of it's a free ride, and just keep going. There's no limitations, and age is not one of them either.
yeah,
So,
absolutely, man. It's been super
so
super
right on.
motivating.
Thanks for joining, Torrey, and then we'll catch up. Let's catch up again in 6 months and see how we're doing.
Awesome. Yes,
Right on, buddy. Take care.
sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks,
Yay.
Mike.